All right, Mr. Fernandez, are we live? I couldn't hear you, sir.
We're live.
Thank you very much. So welcome everybody, staff, council members, and members of the public who might be watching here tonight to the Strategic Planning Committee meeting of the Town of Lake Cowichan, being held Tuesday, November 9th, 2021 at approximately 5:41. This meeting is being held and transmitted electronically as per our procedures bylaw from Lake 39 South Shore Road in Lake Cowichan. Before we call this meeting to order, I'd just like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the traditional territories of the Subasat people of the lake, where we all live, play, and work together happily. With that, I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask if there's any introduction of late items. Don't see any hands, so we're looking for approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Austin, second by Councillor Sandhu. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion's carried. Thank you. Business arising and unfinished business. Ongoing items still being addressed. Tourism roundtable. That's going to take place November 15th at 6 p.m. virtually. So we'll wait for that to happen and then discuss it more than likely on the next strategic planning agenda. We'll talk about the summary of that meeting. So with that, we can move to delegations. Mr. Fernandez, we have Keith Lawrence of the CVRD regarding climate change adaptation and risk management strategy.
Yes, he's supposed to be on. I have advised him that we're early and I still don't see him signed on. He's coming in with Kate. He's told me, Kate Miller.
Okay. So perhaps we can move along to correspondence then, and you can advise us when he comes on.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, we will move along to correspondence. George Hansen, President and CEO of the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance regarding community engagement project. Mr. Fernandez, do you have any comments on that letter?
No, other than I think they're looking for us to join them as a member. They pointed out what they can do for us.
And, oh, looks like there's a membership fee.
Of course.
Yeah. So any members of council have anything to say about that initiative? Councillor Austin.
Not a lot actually, but did you not attend the Vancouver Economic Alliance in October? Did they discuss this type of thing at that conference?
No, I wasn't in any session that discussed this.
Oh, okay, I just wondered.
Yeah, this came right out of the blue sky to me.
It seems more for business to me, but that's just me.
All right. So, does anybody else in council have any comments on that? Mr. Fernandez, is there anything you weren't going to follow up on there, or should we just receive and file?
I would think that if that's the wish of council, yes.
Would somebody like to make that motion?
I'll do.
All right, moved by Councillor Austin, second by Councillor Sandhu. All those in favor, receive and file this letter. Thank you. None opposed. Still no sign of the delegation?
No, if you bear with me, I'll check to see where it's at. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened to him. I can phone him.
So are they on their way or should we move along?
He's joining us right now.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Hi, Joe. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can see you. Yes.
So welcome to the meeting, Keith. So if you're all set up, I guess you have the ability to share your screen, or do you need to?
I do, yes. I will bring that up. Thank you.
I'll have to transfer the screen to you. Where the heck? So Keith, you're going to be the host.
Okay. All right, I will share my screen now. So hopefully all of you can see the first slide. And thank you very much, Mayor and council members. Good evening to each one of you. Thank you for allowing us to share this this strategy, and very much appreciate this opportunity. It is an honor, and we are grateful for the participation of our municipal partners, and very much including the town of Lake Cowichan throughout many of the efforts that have gone underway to support climate change adaptation in the Cowichan region. And so the strategy truly is intended to be a regional piece that captures those efforts, highlights the successes, but also provides an honest acknowledgement of where the gaps are in terms of what are the resources that are needed, what are the additional actions to get us towards adapting to those changes that we know are coming based on the projections that we worked on with Pacific Climate Impacts Consortium. So we'll talk a bit about that as well. So, but again, a little bit of an introduction. My name is Keith Lawrence. I'm with the CVRD Environmental Services, and Kate Miller may also join us, Manager of Environmental Services. And we've been working together on climate adaptation in the region for several decades now. So when we think back to much of the efforts that have happened around drought, for example, in the Cowichan watershed, going back to significant drought events in 2002 and 2003, but also those high flow flood events that we've had in recent years as well. So climate adaptation is nothing new. We've been working on this together, but it was more recently in 2014 to 2018 in the strategic plan that the board prioritized the establishment of a climate adaptation strategy to pull together the work that was already being done and identify what else needed to be done. So the board adopted that strategy in February of 2021, and then directed the development of an implementation framework, essentially a how-to on how we can move forward task by task on each of the actions. All the while, as we've been continuing to complete these key projects, for example, developing the Cowichan Water Use Plan, as well as working on the shoreline assessment and the weir design, for examples, to go back to the board and provide these progress updates on components of the strategy as they continue to be developed. The purpose really today is to be able to share that strategy framework and talk about next steps for completion this year. And so Kate is also just joining here, and hopefully she will appear in a moment. And so when we talk about how this strategy aligns with the various municipal partners, so including the town of Lake Cowichan, the various official community plans, the strategic plans, the climate action plans that are already in place, there was much effort into pulling that together and identifying those areas of overlap where there could be the opportunity for efficiencies and synergies to work together and align those goals, objectives, actions across the various thematic areas, because climate adaptation is so all-encompassing and impacts every aspect of service delivery, to be able to tie those in the various ways into those key strategic planning efforts. The process, again, although it began much before that 2014 timeframe that we show here, was again this culmination of efforts from a variety of groups across the region, including senior levels of government, climate community stewards, the school district, both students and staff, our health authorities, as well as participation from elected officials, getting that input and guidance throughout the process. And ultimately began in a more formal way with the development of these climate projections, which we'll talk about in a moment. Those climate projections give us an idea of what we can expect to see in terms of changes of temperature and precipitation patterns in the years to come out to 2050 and 2080, but Also, very importantly, provided key recommendations for what those projections, how they can be used to support master planning processes, but that also we incorporate those into the various water management and water security planning processes, and also inform this next phase of work, which we've had the opportunity to work with folks on through some funding opportunities, which is natural hazard assessments. So for coastal and river flooding, but also some of the projects that we did up around the lake around geohazard assessment to understand those risks, as well as a number of others, which we'll talk about and in a bit more around wildfire hazard assessment and as well as some other ongoing pieces related to natural hazard risk. Leading into this development of the climate adaptation and risk management strategy, which was a process that we were fortunate enough to have facilitated by ICLEI Canada, a consulting group that is working with local governments across Canada, so that we were able to have those discussions, those workshops with the various folks. And again, appreciating the input from the town of Lake Cowichan in a variety of ways through these actions, which are already underway in many ways, and through the strategy development. So from there, that leads us to where we are today, which is this pulling together of implementation framework for the actions within the strategy. So we'll talk about next steps in a moment as well. But also at this point, noting that although the climate adaptation strategy doesn't specifically focus on GHG mitigation, it is an important component of the overall program for climate action. So recognizing that there are opportunities to have community efforts around greenhouse gas inventory. So understanding what our greenhouse gas emissions are within the region, but also how we can work to reduce those impacts, to do our part of working towards addressing this global problem. At the same time, recognizing the opportunities that we have within our organizations to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint and build those plans out. And so when we look at these different sets of actions, and of course there's a bit of overlap there as well. So we talk about mitigation around reducing fossil fuel burning energy use, but also there's that set of actions that overlaps with adaptation, which is ultimately what the strategy, the climate adaptation strategy, is about, which is helping us address those impacts that we know are expected to come. And so, as mentioned, this first phase of climate projections was an opportunity to look at what can we expect in the way of temperature changes in the years to come, and again, what can we expect in the way of precipitation pattern changes for the various seasons out to 2050 and 2080, as well as the intensity of storm events. So understanding that for each of these, there's sets of actions that we can all take, but we can also take within our organizations to support how we can adapt to these changes, and that's really what the focus of the strategy is about, and we'll talk about those key actions in a moment. So just to visualize in terms of what some of those risk assessments looked like, we had, again, that opportunity to conduct a coastal sea level rise risk assessment, but also dam safety review for a number of key pieces of infrastructure within the region. That geohazard risk assessment on the north shore of Lake Cowichan and the upper river watershed area, as well as some stormwater management planning in the lower Cook-Sila watershed. Also important to mention that our emergency management group has completed wildfire hazard mapping for the region. And there's a number of other risk assessment pieces that are ongoing, including the development of a Chemainus flood management strategy, a regional landslide analysis, and shoreline analysis in the Saltaire area. So some risk assessment that is happening throughout, but it's also taking that risk assessment and being able to build on that. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the actions in a moment. The climate adaptation strategy, again, this third phase, has a vision which is reflective of the community planning and strategic planning processes of the municipal partners as well as the CVRD, and the goals also aligning with those various goals within those strategic plans. There's 45 actions across the 5 theme areas, and we'll go through those theme areas and highlight a few of the key actions that are at this point identified as priorities within the various municipal partner and CVRD strategic planning processes, all the while recognizing that when we go out and meet with folks, we might identify more priority items or something that was less of a priority than it was when the strategy was developed. So as we do that, it's a dynamic process and very much open to that input as we go along and work with staff from our municipal partners. But this first theme area really is about resilient gray and green infrastructure. So it includes these actions of promoting higher development standards. It also includes actions around ensuring natural hazards are considered in land use planning to protect development from hazardous conditions. It's also about updating official community plans so that we can direct future development, redevelopment, and infrastructure to those areas that have lower hazard, but also understanding what the environmental sensitivity of those areas might be. And so that's also a key tie-in to another set of actions that we have around biodiversity and ecosystems, which we'll talk about in a moment. Two other key actions in this thematic area relate to how we manage infrastructure. So those key pieces of regional community infrastructure to be able to apply a climate change risk assessment framework so that we can understand what impacts may be those pieces of infrastructure may be facing, but also the extent of those impacts, and then to take that information and be able to document it into the service delivery plans for those key pieces of infrastructure. So opportunities for all folks to be involved, but particular emphasis on those folks that are managing those key pieces of assets. So for example, water and sewer systems folks, but also those folks that are managing our parks and trails and various community halls. So this is an opportunity here to go out and identify additional groups that may be key towards supporting these actions amongst the various municipal partners as well. This next thematic area around community health and emergency management does have key roles for those folks who are supporting emergency management and preparedness work. And one of the key actions here is the development of a hazard risk and vulnerability assessment. And so that's essentially taking that information that we already have around hazards within the region. So that map that we looked at earlier in terms of wildfire, but also the geohazards and the flood, and be able to integrate that to understand and have a more holistic picture of hazard across the region. And other key actions in this area also include this establishment of a monitoring system. So when we think of monitoring those key metrics such as forecasted flood and drought, but also air quality and weather, so we can understand impacts to our communities. And included here also, given the impacts we've seen with wildfires in recent summers, establishing those clean air shelters within our communities. Green growth and sustainable development has a significant role for those folks working in our economic development groups and sectors, but to work in those key industry sectors, to develop strategic planning initiatives, to continue working with local businesses and tourism, to develop a regional circular economy strategy and action plan, and also to develop long-term agriculture water sustainability plans. This fourth thematic area is, as mentioned, around ecosystems and bioregional carrying capacity. So when we're talking about this thematic area, it's about understanding those environmentally sensitive areas so that we can understand the impacts of climate change to them, but also managing our local government-owned forest areas, those forest areas that we have the most direct influence over, to increase forest resilience, but also to consider biodiversity in those planning efforts as well. And key within the new drinking water and watershed protection function, but also overlapping into climate adaptation, is ensuring drinking water and watershed protection planning processes have community water security plans included in those processes, and also that we're developing coordinated watershed management plans to assist with those land use decision pieces, both on the site scale, but also around at that community decision-making scale. Across those thematic areas, we also have this series of cross-cutting actions which support each of those four thematic areas. And there's opportunities for all folks to be involved in these actions. So it's about establishing relationships with the subject matter experts, whether that's in our partners within the senior levels of government, or with neighboring jurisdictions, for example, but also being able to communicate long-term climate change projections to the community based on the information we have, but also looking at how we can refine that information set over time to continue to check how our assumptions are, if they're still valid, and be able to communicate the most up-to-date information to the public. Keeping up to date with best practices is something that we can all participate in terms of the various networks that we're part of, but also as we learn new practices, to be able to take them back to organizations and share those lessons. And then also key here is for us all to look at our various key service level plans. So plans like liquid waste planning, water supply planning, official community planning, active transportation, as well as emergency management, and look at how we can identify climate adaptation objectives and actions that can be brought into those processes, all the while continuing to work with our local First Nations, as we have been on many projects, but in many ways to be able to deepen those relationships and build new ones, particularly on the new actions that are needed to move forward. So where we're at in terms of this process and next steps is really meeting with our municipal council partners, and very much appreciate again this opportunity this evening, having that opportunity to sit down and talk to municipal staff to incorporate perhaps additional actions that have come up since the strategy was developed, and implement steps into the strategy, those key tasks that need to be completed over the next 2 years, 2022 and 2023. And then working to finalize the implementation plan, and then present the strategy and implementation plan back to elected officials, directors, and steering groups for that final direction on the implementation. So with that, thank you, Kate, also for joining, and maybe if I may pass it to Kate for any closing remarks before passing it back for questions and comments.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate, or not Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity for Keith to present to you. He's an excellent presenter, and I hope that through his presentation, you've been able to sort of see the narrative and the journey that we've been taking over the last few years. One of the things that's obviously going to be affecting your community as a highlight is the revitalization of the Cowichan Lake Weir, which is an adaptive action under that sort of cross-cutting thematic area with regards to partnerships around meeting some of these objectives. So I appreciate your time. If you've got any input, we are definitely happy to receive it. And I know that Keith is going to be reaching out to speak to your staff if that's appropriate and approved by yourselves.
All right, Keith, I just sent you a note in the chat if you could transfer the hosting back to Joe. Oh, you did. Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions for Kate or Keith? Councilor McGonigal.
First of all, thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence, Ms. Miller, for the presentation. Second time I've seen it. And since the original one, we have incorporated regional emergency management planning that will be going forward for consideration. I know that capacity within smaller municipalities within that function is problematic. So with a regional approach, I think that will mitigate some of the problems within that division. Having said that, capacity is always a problem when we're looking at climate adaptation and the mitigating factors that are needed to do that. So with a regional and sub-regional approach on some of those, I think is the answer moving forward. You spoke about working with First Nations, and we continuously reach out to ours in that regard. So I thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Keith and Kate. That was a great presentation, and I look forward to the implementation part, and hopefully our municipality can tag on to that and do whatever we can do. And I know we can always rely on your services through our representative, the CVRD, and stuff like that. So it's awesome work. It's been a long time in the works, I know, and but there's not a better time than the present actually to get going. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope to see you again soon. Okay. You know, I probably could have said it when they were there, but they know it best of all. But the climate change seems to be at the almost at the heart of every discussion in all the conferences I've attended so far. So it's high on the list in a lot of places. So, Councilor McGonigal.
Very comprehensive report, and the second time that I've viewed it, it can be dry in the presentation, and I know hard to follow. But if you dissect into the presentation onto certain slides and just focus on some of the matters that we can do as a municipality, I think that's important to focus on. We as a community have a major contributor to GHG in transportation, for instance. And without increases within that faction, 80% of our GHG emissions reside within transportation. We can fix all the windows we want, we can put sprinklers in all we want, but until we deal with the transportation aspect, our GHG emissions will continue. So looking at incorporating possible employment opportunities locally, by looking at industrial lands, for instance, where people don't have to travel to the Cowichan Valley per se, that can stay and reside and limit the transportation, would be feasible in moving forward in those reductions. But again, that's capacity building. But I look forward to some of the answers coming forward. The Weir project is one that may help in water sustainability, but it may also have some overarching problems in the future. So it's hard to say how that will play out until it has played out. But I do look forward to some of the projects that may come forward and the possible grant applications that coincide with that. And I'll piggyback on that for our sewer infrastructure, for instance, and how we can mitigate some of the climate adaptation within that project.
Thank you very much, Councillor McGonigal. Councillor Austin?
Yes, that was very interesting. Lots of good work done on that. But this was mentioned before a few years ago with droughts that we have in the valley and on this island. This is an island we live on. There's only so much water. I'm wondering why some of the communities are not considering building reservoirs. Qualicum did. And I know one of the councillors I spoke to 3 years ago, I think, said that Qualicum had built their reservoir, and then when Parksville was running a bit low, they asked if they could have some of their water. And they said, build your own reservoir. So I really think people are missing the point here. Like, look at all the rain we've had. We could have filled 100 reservoirs right now for next summer. And nobody's talking about that. All they talk about is the Weir, which is probably what, 3 to 5 years down the road. And you can't just live saying that Cowichan Lake is going to cover everybody's water needs. So I really think that's something they need to look at and consider. You know, in the valley, there are places in the valley that could happen if they wanted to, and that's just my 2 cents worth, or maybe 25 cents worth.
Well, whatever it is, it's always appreciated. I'll give you $1.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Yeah. So, Mr. Fernandez, is this strategy, now that it's, you know, fairly much complete, is that something that maybe the Advisory Planning Commission will go over with the planner and possibly make some adaptations in our official community plan?
Yes,
Possibly.
indeed, it will be, yes. Not possible, it will be.
Okay, good. All right, any more comments on that topic? All right. Okay, so we finished our correspondence and we don't have any reports. We just have a new business item. That was more or less just a placeholder for the conversation that Councillor Austin, myself, and James Van Hemert, the planner, had with our MP, Alistair McGregor, regarding housing. He is believed headed off to Ottawa now, but before he went, he wanted to meet all the mayors and chairs on Vancouver Island and just talk about housing for a few minutes and see, because that's one item that he wants to work hard on during this this term in the government. So we had a great conversation, and it started off with our planner presenting the highlights of our housing needs assessment, the amended one. And that fueled some great conversation back and forth, and James actually stayed on the call for about 10 or 15 minutes as well, and there was some great conversation, and I think Alistair learned a few things there too. So after that, James went, and Councillor Austin and I just carried on the conversation along the same veins, and we heard a lot of great things that Alistair or MP McGregor heard from other communities. For instance, in Langford, we all know the progressive nature of that group. They want to start going up now instead of out, and they need some help. And quite simply said, just send us the money, we can do the work. Was the comments back from the mayor of Langford. So that's where that led. Councillor Austin, could you fill in any gaps that I may have left there?
Well, I just want to say I was really impressed with Alistair, that he was going to all the different communities to find out what we want and he's going to take that back to Ottawa. He's not telling us what they can do. He's asking what we want and then seeing what they can come up with. I did talk a little bit about co-op housing, which they used to do. And that really helps, especially single parents, to get into co-op housing. And there's a lot of it in Victoria and things like that. But he was very open to anything we said. And I'm pleased that he did so much research. He just didn't go charging back to Ottawa, saying what he felt that he felt we needed. So I was impressed with that. And James does a great job. And, you know, he bragged about our town, about how well we handle things with getting permits out and variances and public meetings. And didn't he, Bob? He said our town doesn't have a problem if you come in and want to do something that fits in with the guidelines and the zoning bylaw and everything. You shouldn't have much of a problem. It doesn't take months and months and months like it does in other places. So he really bragged about our town. So that was important to me. And yeah, it was a good meeting. Really fun, really good.
Yeah, and I tend to agree, even though James was responsible for the official community plan and the various bylaws and stuff. I've heard it before, and listening to other municipalities, we are a little ahead of most small municipalities when it comes to how organized we are with our bylaws and our official community plan. So it makes it real easy for staff to help guide development in the right direction. Councilor McDonald, did you have your hand up?
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity for you two to reach out to our member of parliament and bring those concerns forward. But having the housing needs assessment that we currently have, the amended one that James has, is great. But it's nothing if there's no implementation. So looking forward in any oncoming subdivision applications, that strategy should be incorporated into any new developments on the assessments that are within that report. And then that would be the approving officer. And as long as it fits within the zoning of that, I think it's important to look at the cross-section of the needs within the community. For instance, apartment buildings was a high priority in that assessment. 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, townhouses. So looking at a cross-section of availability and realizing that all housing, whether it be the needs of those who are marginally housed, may not be on the backs of regional and municipal governments. Senior levels of governments have to contribute as well on the aspects of that to afford housing to everyone. So I think it's important as it lays now, the implementation portion to appease some of those needs is needed.
Yeah, great comments, Councilor McGonigal. Yeah, and that's sort of where the conversation left off, was that, you know, that there's lots of small communities like us that we can't do a darn thing. I mean, we could charge $1,000 a lot or $5,000 a unit if we wanted to build an affordable housing account, but it's going to take a long time to be able to do anything in this market, right? So basically, James brought it up too. He said that the government needs to create housing, and of course that wouldn't be us, but we could be the facilitator or you know, help the money flow this way, I guess, in some way, shape, or form. I don't know how, but no, yeah. So good comments, Councilor McGonigal, and that's where the conversation sort of led off.
So just to piggyback on that, there was a national housing strategy back in the 60s and 70s that has gone to the wayside. The re-implementation of that could reinvigorate small communities to incorporate those needs, which they have identified, and keep people living in the community that they choose. So the reinitiation of a national housing strategy, I know it has been in the works, it's coming forward, but it's nothing as opposed to what it was back in the 70s and 60s, where true housing needs were implemented across the nation, and that has to be looked at again.
Yeah. Okay, so, you know, my summary of all this, as I thought about it since that meeting, is I'd like to leave this topic on this agenda for next month, And then perhaps we can distribute our actual amended housing needs assessment, and we could just talk about that for a few minutes at the next meeting. We can talk about, what each of us think is needed, but it says in the assessments, we need 72 one-bedroom units by 2025. So, and then perhaps we could talk about moving this topic to our strategic plan because it's not there. So just to carry on the conversation and see where it goes. And, and maybe with our partners at the Cowichan Housing Association, we could just push the button there a bit, and maybe they can, guide us in the right direction if we see an opening.
And I'd also like to hear from our CAO and our approving officer on how we could implement that in new subdivision builds, whether it's incentivizing or some opportunities to incorporate that. Developers want to make money too, and we can't negate that opportunity for developers or business, but there has to be some form of opportunity for those in need as well.
Yeah. And one of James's comments said that he's employed the tools that we do have in the toolbox right now with developers, but nobody seems to want to bite on this piece that we need. And so I think he seems to be into that topic too. So maybe we can get a little bit of a staff report next time as well, and we can talk about this a little more next month. Get a little deeper into it, because you know what, housing is probably one of the next most important things besides what we already do. But we're not going to build it, so we just need to figure out how to get it done. All right. Anybody else? All right. So there's no notices of motions. Are there any more public relations items from anybody? Go ahead, Councillor Austin.
It's not a major one really, but the booster shots are available at CATSA Health Unit now on Wednesdays, and they are emailing people. We're going next week for ours, so people need to know that they can register for those things, any of their shots. Sorry, I got a phone thing here going. So that's important, because someone was saying to me the other day, there's nothing going on at the health unit, and I said there's something on every single day now. The nurse practitioner Monday and Friday, well baby and family clinics on Tuesday, COVID clinics on Wednesdays, and there's youth counseling. It's quite a bit of stuff going on there. So people need to know, if they go by between 12 and 1 and there's no cars there, they're at lunch. So I just wanted that to be clear. I hear a lot about that.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Austin. So if there's nothing else, then we'll move to question period, where members of the public can call in their questions to 250-749-6681, or they can email their questions quickly to general@lakecowichan.ca. Once again, that's 250-749-6681 if you'd like to call in your questions. We have a maximum of 3 minutes per question per speaker if you call in, and we allot 15 minutes for that question period. So with that, we can break for 3 minutes. That'll bring us back at 6:32. Mr. Fernandez, is there any questions?
No questions at all.
All right. So we can go to, says number 12, but I think it means 11. Adjournment. Moved by Councilor McGonigal, second by Councilor Sandu. All those in favor? None opposed. The motion carries. So, Joe, are we gonna like try and coax the fire department to come on a little early, or
I'll try.
take a little break again?
Okay. Good.